On a scorching afternoon, Clint Eastwood noticed a pregnant woman working tirelessly at a gas station and with an entirely unexpected act, shocked everyone, setting the stage for a story where the improbable meets the extraordinary. Mary stood, frozen in the doorway of the small diner kitchen, her apron stained with grease and hands trembling. Through the serving window, she could see the health inspector speaking with Tommy, her 8-year-old son who was supposed to be quietly coloring in the corner booth. Instead, he was animatedly describing how he sometimes helped his mom prep vegetables after school. "And Sarah gets to wipe the tables when there aren't customers," Tommy continued proudly, unaware of the inspector making rapid notes on his clipboard. Mary's heart hammered against her ribs. This inspection was already going badly. The ancient refrigerator had been 2 degrees above regulation, and now her children's presence in the food preparation area would surely be the final strike. One more violation, and the Starlight Diner would be shut down. Behind her, the back door swung open as her waitress Donna rushed in, her eyes wide. "Mary, there's a black truck pulling up outside. It's him." Him. The silent investor who'd bought the building 3 months ago. The mysterious businessman who'd never set foot in the diner, but whose lawyer had made it clear the property was more valuable empty than with a struggling single mother's restaurant taking up space. "Not today," Mary whispered. She was 5, months pregnant, had 2 children to feed, and this diner was all she had left after her husband walked out. She couldn't lose it now. The front door chimed as the visitor entered, a tall figure silhouetted against the morning light. The health inspector turned, clipboard in hand, as the man approached. Weather-worn jeans, leather jacket, and a gaze that took in everything before settling on Mary. Clint Eastwood had arrived at precisely the worst possible moment, and somehow Mary knew her entire future hinged on what happened next. 6 months earlier, Mary had been working the overnight shift at the Lone Star gas station on Highway 16, the only job she could find that let her bring Tommy and Sarah along. The owner, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Eddie, had set up a small play area in the back office where the kids could sleep on a fold-out cot while Mary worked the register from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. At 32, Mary's dreams of becoming a chef had long been replaced by the brutal arithmetic of survival. Each night she calculated how many hours she needed to work to cover rent, utilities, and food. The answer was always the same: more than humanly possible. It had been different once. Before David left, they'd talked about opening a small restaurant together, Mary cooking, David handling the business side. They'd even saved enough for culinary school tuition. Then came the positive pregnancy test, followed by David's truck disappearing from their driveway the next morning, along with their savings. Now, 3 months pregnant with her 3rd child, Mary worked at the gas station 6 nights a week and picked up shifts at the local diner when she could. Sleep came in 3-hour increments between responsibilities. Dark circles had become permanent fixtures under her eyes, but her smile for customers never wavered. That night, the station was quiet. Tommy and Sarah were asleep in the back, and Mary was cleaning the coffee station when the bell chimed. A black pickup truck had pulled up to the pumps. She watched through the window as the driver stepped out, an older man with a straight posture that suggested military background or simply the kind of self-assurance that came from a life fully lived. He filled his tank methodically, then walked toward the store. When he entered, Mary recognized him immediately. Everyone in America would. Clint Eastwood, with his trademark squint and weathered features, looking as if he'd walked straight off a movie set. "Evening," he said, his voice that familiar gravelly rumble. Mary managed to respond professionally despite her surprise. "Good evening, sir. Will that be all for you?" He placed a coffee on the counter, and whatever those kids in the back might like for breakfast. He nodded toward the office door, which Mary had left slightly ajar to hear if the children woke. Heat rushed to her face. "I'm sorry about that. My babysitter fell through, and I couldn't miss another shift." Clint held up a hand. No explanation needed. As Mary rang him up, Tommy wandered out from the back room, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, is it morning yet?" Before Mary could usher him back, Clint crouched down to the boy's level. "Not quite yet, partner. Still a few hours till sunrise." Tommy stared, immediately wide awake. "You talk like the cowboys in the movies." Mary started to apologize, but Clint chuckled. "I suppose I do." After paying, Clint lingered, sipping his coffee and asking Tommy questions about school and his favorite subjects. Sarah eventually joined them, shy at first but quickly warming up when Clint produced 2 candy bars from his pocket. "If your mom says it's okay." Mary should have been uncomfortable with the attention, but something about Clint's manner put her at ease. He wasn't condescending or pitying. He spoke to her children with genuine interest and to her with respect. As he turned to leave, he paused. "You work here every night?" "6 nights a week," Mary replied. He nodded thoughtfully. "That's a long shift to handle alone." "We do what we have to," she said, the mantra she'd repeated to herself countless times. "Yes," he agreed. "We do." Mary. He expected that to be the end of it, a strange, surreal encounter to tell the kids about someday. But Clint returned the next night, and the night after that. He'd buy coffee, chat with the children if they were awake, and ask Mary questions that went beyond small talk. Where was she from originally? What would she do if she could do anything? Did she like cooking as much as Tommy claimed she did? On his 4th visit, he arrived just as Mary was wiping down the counter, her hand pressed against her lower back to ease the ache of standing all night. "You said you wanted to be a chef," he said without preamble. Mary looked up, startled. "Once, a long time ago." "Why'd you stop?" She gestured vaguely around the gas station. Reality got in the way. Clint set a folded newspaper on the counter. "Page 12, circle at the bottom." After he left, Mary opened the paper to find a listing circled in red. "Foreclosure sale, Starlight Diner, Main Street, auction next Monday." The Starlight had been a Shore-Point institution for decades, but had fallen into disrepair and financial trouble after the owner passed away. Mary had applied for a job there when she first moved to town, but had been turned away. The place was already on its last legs. She couldn't imagine why Clint would show her this, a reminder of another opportunity she couldn't afford to take. He returned the next night with more details. The diner was being sold at auction, buildings and equipment included. The starting bid was low because the place needed significant work. "I don't understand," Mary said finally. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you should be cooking real food, not selling microwaved burritos." Clint's directness was startling. "And those kids of yours deserve to see their mother building something, not just surviving." "I can't afford to buy a diner." "You can't," he agreed, "but I can." Mary stared at him, disbelieving. "You want to buy the Starlight? Why?" "Investment properties are a good hedge against inflation." His tone was matter of fact. "And I need someone to run it, someone with a stake in making it work." "Why me? You don't even know me." He considered this, then said simply, "I'm a good judge of character, always have been." The proposal he laid out was straightforward. He would purchase the diner and handle the renovations. Mary would manage it, design the menu and hire staff. They would split the profits, with Mary having the option to buy him out gradually. "This is crazy," she said when he finished. "People don't just do this for strangers." "I'm not doing it for you," Clint replied. "I'm doing it because it makes sense. Town needs a good diner. You need a better job. I need a business that doesn't require my daily attention." It sounded logical when he put it that way, but Mary remained skeptical. "And if it fails?" "Then we both lose some money and move on." He shrugged. "I can afford to lose more than you, which is why I'm taking the bigger risk." Mary thought of her children, of the baby growing inside her, of endless nights at a gas station stretching into the future. "I need to think about it." "Auction's Monday," he reminded her. "Think fast." She did. For 3 days, she weighed every angle, made calculations, and tried to find the catch. On Sunday night, when Clint arrived for his coffee, she had her answer. "If we do this," she said, "it has to be a real partnership, not charity." He nodded once. Wouldn't have it any other way. The transformation of the Starlight Diner. From abandoned greasy spoon to functioning restaurant happened in a whirlwind of activity. Clint handled the purchase efficiently, outbidding the only other interested party, a developer who wanted to demolish the building for a parking lot. The renovations were more extensive than initially expected. The kitchen equipment was outdated, the plumbing suspect, and the roof leaked in 3 places. Mary worried about the mounting costs, but Clint remained unruffled. "Buildings are like people," he told her as they inspected the patched roof. "They need maintenance. Ignore problems too long, they only get worse." Mary suspected he wasn't just talking about the diner. While contractors worked on the structural issues, Mary focused on the menu and staffing. She hired Donna, a veteran waitress from the next town over, and Miguel, a line cook with a community college culinary degree who had been delivering pizzas to make ends meet. The menu Mary designed was simple but thoughtful. Classic diner fare elevated with fresh ingredients and her own touches. Biscuits made from her grandmother's recipe, meatloaf with a glaze that had won her a blue ribbon at the county fair when she was 16, pies that Tommy and Sarah helped assemble on the weekends. Clint stopped by occasionally to check on progress, but never interfered with Mary's decisions. His presence caused a stir in the small town, but he deflected attention with practiced ease, always redirecting conversations back to the diner and Mary's cooking. 2 weeks before the planned opening, Mary was organizing the new freezer when she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She grabbed the counter, breathing through it, but when a second, stronger contraction followed, panic set in. It was too early. She was barely into her second trimester. Donna found her doubled over and immediately called an ambulance. At the hospital, after hours of tests and monitoring, the doctor delivered both good and bad news. The baby was stable, but Mary needed bed rest for at least a week. Any more physical strain could trigger premature labor. "The opening," Mary protested. "We've advertised. People are expecting us to open Saturday." "Someone else will have to handle it," the doctor said firmly. When Clint visited the hospital that evening, Mary was fighting back tears of frustration. "I've messed it all up," she said. "You've invested all this money and now I can't even be there for opening day." "Diner's not going anywhere," he replied calmly. "We'll postpone." "We can't. We've got food ordered, staff scheduled, advertisements in the paper." Clint considered this. "Then we open without you temporarily." "Who's going to cook? Miguel's good, but he can't handle a full menu alone." A slight smile crossed Clint's face. "I know a few people who owe me favors, including a chef or 2. True to his word, Clint arranged for a chef from a high-end restaurant in Austin to come handle the opening weekend. He also personally covered Mary's hospital bills. "Part of your health benefits package," he insisted when she tried to protest. The Starlight opened on schedule, and though Mary watched via video calls from her hospital bed, the success was bittersweet. It should have been her triumph, her new beginning. Instead, she felt like a spectator at her own life. When she was finally cleared to return to work, with strict limitations on lifting and standing, Mary found the diner running smoothly without her. The temporary chef had trained Miguel, Donna had systems in place for service, and the reviews in the local paper were glowing. "Maybe you don't need me after all," she said to Clint after a busy lunch service, trying to mask her insecurity with humor. He looked at her directly, his expression serious. "This place works because of you, the menu, the staff, the feel of it. That's all, Mary. I just provided the walls." Those words stayed with her as the weeks passed and the diner established itself as a community fixture. Locals came for breakfast meetings, families filled the booths on weekends, and even the notoriously critical high school teachers approved of the after-school specials Mary created for students. Tommy and Sarah became fixtures at the diner too. After school, they would sit at the counter, doing homework and occasionally helping with simple tasks. Mary worried about imposing her children on the business, but customers seemed charmed by them. "Reminds me of how diners used to be," one elderly regular told her. "Family places where you watch the next generation grow up over pancakes and coffee." As her pregnancy progressed, Mary gradually stepped back from cooking duties, training Miguel to take over more responsibilities. She focused on management and menu planning, preparing for the time when she would need to be away after the baby's birth. Clint visited less frequently as the diner stabilized, but he called regularly for updates. When he did appear, he would sit at the counter, drink coffee, and observe the operation with evident satisfaction. 3 months after opening, just as Mary was entering her 3rd trimester, the first crisis hit, a health inspection triggered by an anonymous complaint. The timing couldn't have been worse. Their head dishwasher had quit the day before, leaving them temporarily short-staffed, and the ancient refrigerator was acting up again. And now, as Mary stood watching Tommy inadvertently reveal violations to the inspector, with Clint Eastwood himself walking through the door, all the fragile success she'd built seemed ready to collapse. The health inspector turned toward Clint, recognition flickering across his face. "Mr. Eastwood, I didn't realize you were connected with this establishment." "I own the building," Clint replied, his voice neutral as he surveyed the scene. "Ms. Taylor runs the operation." Mary stepped forward, trying to maintain her composure. "Mr. Reynolds, I can explain about the children. Children aren't permitted in food preparation areas," the inspector said flatly. "It's a clear violation, along with the temperature issues I've already documented." Clint moved to stand beside Mary. "These children are part of a supervised educational program, learning about nutrition and food service under professional guidance. We have parental waivers and a structured curriculum." The lie was delivered with such conviction that even Mary almost believed it. "I wasn't aware of any such program," Reynolds said, hesitation creeping into his voice. "It's new," Clint continued smoothly. "Part of our community outreach. We're still working out the details, but the children are never unsupervised and they don't handle food for public consumption." The inspector glanced at his clipboard, then at Tommy and Sarah, who were watching the exchange with wide eyes. "As for the refrigerator," Clint added, "we've already ordered a replacement. Should be installed by tomorrow. We've been monitoring temperatures hourly and discarding anything questionable." Mary nodded quickly. "I have the temperature logs right here." She pulled a clipboard from beneath the counter, the actual equipment, monitoring sheets she'd been keeping, though not as diligently as Clint implied. Reynolds reviewed the logs, his frown easing slightly. "I'll need to note the violations, but if the refrigerator is being replaced immediately," he cleared his throat, "and I'll need documentation on that educational program." "You'll have it by the end of the week," Clint assured him. After the inspector left, with a provisional pass contingent on the refrigerator replacement, Mary sank into a booth, her legs shaking. "How did you know to come today?" she asked Clint. "I didn't," he admitted, sliding into the seat across from her. "I was coming to discuss something else entirely." "The educational program doesn't exist," Mary said quietly. "It does now." Clint's expression was determined. "We'll set it up properly. Get the paperwork in order." Mary shook her head in disbelief. "You lied to a health inspector for me." "I bought us time to do the right thing," he corrected. "There's a difference." Tommy approached the table cautiously. "Mom, did I get you in trouble?" Mary pulled him into a hug. "No, sweetie, everything's okay." "But that man was writing things down when I told him about helping with the vegetables." "That's because we're starting a special program," Clinty interjected, "where kids like you and Sarah can learn about restaurants properly, with rules and lessons." Tommy's face brightened. "Like a cooking school." "Something like that." After the children returned to their corner booth, Mary faced Clint. "I can't afford a new industrial refrigerator by tomorrow." "Already ordered," he replied. "Part of building maintenance. My responsibility under our agreement." "And this, to educational program. Actually, not a bad idea." He leaned back, thoughtful. "Structured after-school program, teaching kids about food service, nutrition, maybe even basic business skills. Could be good for the community. Good for business too." Mary studied him, trying to understand. "Why do you keep doing this?" "Solving problems, creating opportunities. What do you get out of it?" Clint was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving around the diner, to the customers enjoying their meals, to Tommy and Sarah coloring at their table, to the kitchen where Miguel was expertly flipping burgers. "You know, "I've played a lot of roles," he said finally. "Cowboys, cops, cranky old men. But the ones that stick with you are the ones where you build something, leave something better than you found it." He turned back to Mary. "I don't need more money or fame. But seeing this place work, seeing you and those kids have a shot at something good, that's worth more." Mary felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Pregnancy hormones, she told herself, not the unexpected weight of kindness from a man Hollywood had typecast as tough and unforgiving. Now, Clint continued, all business again, about what I actually came to discuss. "I've been thinking about the back lot. Wasted space right now. Could be a good spot for an herb garden, maybe some outdoor seating for spring." And just like that, they were planning again, building something together from the bones of what had nearly failed. The new refrigerator arrived early the next morning, the week after they submitted formal paperwork for the Starlight Junior Chef program, complete with educational objectives and safety protocols. Tommy and Sarah were the first official participants, joined shortly by other children from the community. As her due date approached, Mary found herself reflecting on the unlikely journey from that midnight shift at the gas station to running her own diner. The path hadn't been straight or simple, but for the first time in years she was creating rather than just surviving. One afternoon, as she was reviewing the books in her small office, Clint stopped by with a manila envelope. "Paperwork, you." "Should have," he said, placing it on her desk. Inside, Mary found the deed to the Starlight Diner, amended to list her as co-owner with a 51% controlling interest. "This isn't our agreement," she said, stunned. "I was supposed to buy in gradually." "Consider it amended." Clint's expression was firm. "You've more than proven yourself. The diner's profitable, the community program is working, and your banana cream pie alone is worth the investment." Mary laughed despite her shock. "I can't accept this." "You already did." He nodded toward her expanded belly. "That baby deserves a mother who owns her work, not just manages it." When her daughter was born 2 weeks later, healthy and strong, despite the earlier complications, Mary named her Hope. It seemed fitting for a child who would grow up in a diner that had been saved by an unlikely partnership, built on second chances and the belief that sometimes people could surprise you in the best possible ways. 6 months after Hope's birth, the Starlight was featured in a regional magazine as a model of small-town business revival. The article mentioned the famous silent partner, though Clint had declined to be interviewed or photographed for the piece. "It's not my story," he told Mary when she asked why. "It's yours." And it was. The diner continued to thrive under Mary's direction. The junior chef program expanded to include weekend workshops and summer activities. Tommy and Sarah grew more confident and capable, taking pride in their mother's accomplishment and their own contributions. One evening, as Mary was closing up, Clint arrived for his occasional coffee and status update. He sat at the counter while she counted the register, comfortable in the silence they'd developed over their unusual partnership. "Why did you really stop that first night?" Mary asked suddenly. "At the gas station. You could have gotten your coffee anywhere." Clint considered the question. "My father worked 2 jobs most of his life," he said finally. "Never complained, never stopped trying to make things better for us. When I saw you there with those kids," he shrugged, "reminded me that some of the strongest people are the ones nobody notices." Mary nodded, understanding. Sometimes kindness wasn't about charity or obligation. Sometimes it was about recognition, seeing the fight in someone and deciding they deserved reinforcements. "Well," she said, sliding a slice of fresh apple pie toward him, "I'm glad you stopped." Outside, the neon Starlight Diner sign flickered, on against the gathering dusk, its warm glow reaching across the parking lot like a beacon. Inside, a family built not by blood but by chance and choice shared a moment of quiet appreciation for how unexpected life's best turns could be.